ArmageddonQuest. So, ArmageddonQuest is an actual 1980s comic, right? It's not just something in a style of the 1980s underground black and white comics, but it is from Ronald Russell Roach. This is the coming-of-age tale of the Antichrist. And so, but he's a reluctant Antichrist, he's a nice guy Antichrist, doesn't want to be the Antichrist, doesn't want to end the world, doesn't want to hurt anybody, but the rest of the world wants him to fulfill the prophecy. You have the people who want him to fulfill the prophecy for nefarious reasons, and those that want him to fulfill the prophecy for, I guess, still nefarious reasons, but like, you know, they're on the side of quote-unquote righteousness, but it's like, we need our villain. We need the demon so we can be the good guys, and so you still have to be that villain and fulfill the prophecy we've been saying is supposed to happen, because that's what makes us the good guys. There's a lot of social commentary, cultural commentary, and you can imagine it's a coming-of-age story about finding your own path, finding your own way, being the person you want to be rather than the person people say you're supposed to be, all dressed in an honest-to-God epic that ends in the event of Armageddon. My name is Dave Baxter. I started up a show called the Wine and Comics Pairing Show. And now we are here today where we have launched the Wine and Comics Publishing, which is, and our very first book, ArmageddonQuest, is now on Kickstarter. That's who I am as of right now. I live in Los Angeles. I'm in the film and TV world. I work for Sundance currently. Ronald Russell Roach, the creator of ArmageddonQuest, made this entire series between 1984 and 1992. I was working on the story for many years even before that, and I read the comics, so it was published ever so briefly in the 90s. This is the original trilogy of graphic novels that was published back in the mid-90s by Sirius Press. And you can see these covers by Joseph Michael Lisner, who a lot of people know from the Dawn or Cry for Dawn series back then. And Sirius is really well known for the Dawn series and Poison Elves by Drew Hayes. I got my hands on this trilogy of graphic novels. They were all just kind of like bundled in a bargain bin somewhere at my local comic shop back in the 90s. I'd never heard of it. No one's ever heard of it. But I saw it and I was like, look at that. And it, you know, there was something like $10 for all three, and I was just like, fuck yeah. And I mean, you know, this was back in the day, so the cover price on these was like $13 each, and these are like 300 pages each. So but it was still like a bargain deal. I'd never heard of it. I needed something for a family car ride to read because we were gonna be traveling. It was gonna be like this 16-hour going from Northern Virginia all the way to the top of Michigan, and I read all three in that one car ride. It sucked me in. I couldn't take my eyes off it. I didn't want to stop. I didn't want to do, and you know, you can kind of get an idea of like the art style on the inside. This is a dense read of a comic. Like this is some text in here, while also having that wonderful 80s black and white feel to the art. But you know, the art and the writing is so much more nuanced and well constructed, because if you guys go back, I like to compare the art style and the feel of this book to the old original Eastman and Laird TMNT, right? It's early issues, but if you go back and read the early TMNT issues, like, they were decent artists. They were finding their way as writers for a little while. Like, the series, this entire series, like, there's no learning curve to this one, unlike with TMNT, where it's like, you gotta read a few issues. Like, they're fun in the early days, but they're not good. And then as time goes on, they really start experimenting more as writers and like what they're doing and the funky stuff happening in the comic, and it becomes something really kind of like, this is actually well done. Ron had been writing for a long time before he started in on this version of ArmageddonQuest. He had done hundreds of pages of comics already that no one has ever seen. And so by the time he did this, like, he's kicking it off with like his voice, the writing, the art style, like, it's well honed. And so the first few pages are just like, boom, you're in. As this story goes on, it is far crazier than anything you've ever seen in TMNT, believe it or not. Even those old Eastman and Lairds, like, far crazier. And yet it's all so wonderfully, the way all the disparate elements meld together and create this epic story, it blew my mind. I'd never read anything like it. Still, haven't actually read anything like it since that day. So it became my favorite comic of all time. It's my number one. I always name it that way. I've never read anything that has yet taken its place, and yet I have no one to talk to about this comic, because I'm like, but ArmageddonQuest, and like even people who are into old school underground comics of this era have not fucking heard of this comic. So it's just sort of like, I just get a blank stare whenever I bring it up. I usually don't have visual aids on hand when I'm talking to people, because I'm not that nerd who keeps it in the backpack and like is like ready to whip it out at any moment just to show people. I probably should be that person, but I'm not. So I'm always I just have to like regale them with this story, and people are like, oh, okay, but I've never heard of it. And there's always that suspicion, if you've never heard of it, could it really be that good, right? How does the cream not actually rise to the top? And is it just something that this weird guy thinks is like the pinnacle of comics? If it is, like, it's not possible that no one has heard of it. I'm here to tell you guys it's possible. I don't know what you personally, whoever's watching this, is gonna actually think of this book, but I will tell you it's gonna leave a mark. Like, you're not gonna read it and forget about it easily. Beyond just being a fan of it though, I wrote this big write-up on ArmageddonQuest. I did a couple of years writing for comics websites. I think it was for Broken Frontier that I wrote this big, long love letter to ArmageddonQuest. And the creator read it and saw it. He wrote to me, and because I had my bio on the site with my contact information and things like that. So he wrote to me and said, like, I appreciate having read this and that someone remembers this and has read it and loved it so much, because as you can imagine, he doesn't get a lot of fan mail because not many people, no one knows this thing exists. And he hasn't really done anything else except ArmageddonQuest. I mean, he has, but not published. This is his work. This is the thing that he's done so far. If this is successful, we got more coming, because he's got more. So anyway, we became kind of pen pals, that we would email each other once or twice a year. Nothing crazy, but it was like we'd stay in touch. So the pitch, it's the coming of age of the Antichrist. Lots of people were interested, but it's such a quirky comic. It's so its own little thing. It's not for kids, but it's not adult in a sexy, easy sell way. Like, it's not safe for work. It's got very heady themes. It's got a lot of nudity, language, explicitness, violence, blood and gore, but not in the normal way in which we thrill to those things. So no one could really see how they were going to sell that to their audiences of those elements, which is always where the problem comes in with unique voices like this. So now we're back doing Wine and Comics and getting back involved with the comics community, having all these different crowdfunding creators on the Wine and Comics Pairing Show. I started to get the itch again, and I started to get the idea in my head that I really wanted to attempt something on Kickstarter. And I reached out to Ron and I was like, he's in his 80s these days. Like, he's like, if you're gonna do everything, then he's like, you have my blessing, let's do this. And we have a deal, we have a contract between each other, how it's gonna work depending on how much money it makes. And as we go issue to issue, like, I'm sure this first one, we're basically gonna make the goal, maybe a touch more. I'm not expecting more than that, but as we keep going and build, the idea of this is to build an actual audience. That is what I want to do. It's not so much about making anyone rich, it's not about anything else. It's just, I want people who care about these kinds of comics to know about this one, finally. I'm not going to say I hope they get everything out of the comic that I think they will. It's a unique comic, so everyone's going to, have their own connection to it and decide how much they like the style or not. You're not going to forget it. One cool thing about this new edition that we're doing, and this is a great example of how people can approach this comic, is we have a new introduction by Joshua Dessart, New York Times bestselling graphic novelist, Vertigo's Unknown Soldier, Swamp Thing, harbinger for the new Valiant. Not the new Valiant, which is happening right now. When they were first relaunching, he was the OG guy who made Harbinger the big thing that it was then, which a lot of people swear by. And now he's done a series for Bad Idea, Orc Island, and Odin's Eye. I gave him, he lives in LA as well, so I befriended him over a decade ago. And we talk and hang out, again, like once a year. We're very lazy about these things, but every once in a while we'll get together. And at one point, you know, I'm sure this conversation came, I don't even remember how I gave him a copy of Armageddon Quest, but I'm sure somewhere in talking, we were talking about our favorite comics or something, and I brought it up, and he's like, the fucks? You know, how come I've never heard of it? And always the thing, how come I've never heard of it? And I'm like, well, here. And I shoved the first graphic novel into his hands. I asked him, I'm like, hey, you've read this. Do you think you could, and I had shoved this into the hands of a few people by then. So I'd asked them all for pull quotes at that point. And I'm like, can I get a pull quote so I can pitch this around and have someone say it? And we got a pull quote from Scott McCloud, which we're still using to this day on this Kickstarter. Pull quote from Tom Spurgeon at Comics Reporter. Joshua I reached out to, and he was like, I can't. He's like, I don't think I like it. And I was like, oh. And he's like, I'm trying, I want to like it, but it breaks all the rules. It breaks too many rules. It's like all the rules they're there for a reason, and I don't think, I can't, this isn't how you're supposed to write something. And I was like, oh, okay, well, no harm, no foul. You hold on to that copy though, it's yours. You know, I'm not gonna sue you for a year, so like, I'm like, forget about it, it's good, that's yours. It was only in like the last 6 months or so that I think I told him I was thinking about doing this again. We were just catching up. And he was like, oh, I've been meaning to tell you, I fucking love Armageddon Quest now. And I was like, oh, great. I mean, and I wasn't even asking him for a pull quote or anything. I was just like, I'm glad you can appreciate it now. And he came back with, no, not just appreciate it, I fucking love it. He's like, this thing is like, this is a true, like, underground work of art. And like, I feel like a fucking idiot I didn't appreciate it for what it was before, and that it took me this long. And I thought that was such a perfect example of what many readers might face when reading this for the first time. I know it blew my mind. I loved how it blew my mind the first time I read it, so it was like instant love. But having your mind blown isn't always a positive, right? Like we don't think of it as having our mind blown when it's a negative effect. We think something is just doing shit wrong in a way that we've never seen before, but we're almost not even giving it credit that it's doing it wrong in a way we've never seen before. We're just like, oh, no, none of this works, and we reject it. It's hard for me to understand that POV because I think every time I experience something that's truly new, even if I don't know if I like it, I love it for being new. I love it for being something, you know, I read so much, and I'm not a spring chicken anymore, like I ain't young. I've read so much that when I read something, like we get cynical thinking we're never really gonna encounter something truly new anymore once you've read so much. And so when you fucking do, it's always a positive for me. Like I'm always like, that is an admirable failure. Like I am like that is the worst case scenario for me, where I'm like, I'm pretty sure most of what that person tried to do didn't work. But I admire that they like swung for the fences and, you know, did these brave, bold decisions that I've never seen anyone make before in a story, in a comic, in a movie, in a whatever. And so Josh's take of rejecting, like being like, no, this is wrong. This isn't how you do a comic. This isn't how you tell a story. And be able to, like, a couple years later, come back, swing back around to it, and like apparently he kept reading it, he kept going back to it, which is the other thing that I think that really touched me, is that concept of you don't like something, but you also, like I said, you're not gonna not remember this once you read it. Like you keep poking at it. You keep poking the bear until suddenly you turn extreme hate into extreme love almost, like these two polar opposite reactions. And so Josh is now writing the intro for the new editions because I'm like, that I think is most people's worst case scenario. It's like, you might not love this the way I love it on first blush, but you're gonna remember it, and chances are maybe you'll have Josh's experience here. You know, an award-winning writer, a best-selling writer who like now thinks this is an exemplar of brave writing, you know, and something new and different that does in fact work and that you can fall in love with. So you can have Josh's version of how you fall in love with Armageddon Quest, or my instant love version of how you fall in love with it, but I'm just so confident that the vast majority of people who actually read this comic will fall in love with it. Don't get me wrong, like, this is not it wasn't meant to be a highly experimental graphic novel. It is what happens when you have a solo voice that is their own voice, that is just making it for themselves. And it is such a carefully constructed comic as an epic, as an overall epic, which is the other thing that I think that impresses me about it. That's hard to get across when you're just selling that first issue, that first chapter, because it's just the opening. He's writing it in the way he would tell a story, totally divided from like best practices and like any sort of 3-act structure or heroic Joseph Campbell's hero cycle or anything like that. He's a Westerner. I'm sure all of those things are things that are kind of in his head. He knows what those rules are. But then he just told the story the way he's like, he finished the whole thing before anyone published any of it. So he just wrote it for himself. And then when it was done, it was sort of like, here you go, you know, I'm done. And I think that's how you get these. Now, don't get me wrong, you know, lots of people have those whole novels we've written and then had to put under our bed and never look at again because it was like, that was my practice run. Like I probably didn't know what I was doing there. This was not Ron's practice run. This was well after his practice runs, and he still just wrote it for himself and finished the whole thing without any real feedback from anybody. So it still winds up, you know, having that unique character to it. So yeah. There's this weird kind of childish naivety to the whole thing, and yet, even though almost nothing happening is childish on the page, like you're like, whoa! But then the way he delivers all this story is in this just super sweet, charming, you know, I have a hard time comparing it to so many things. You have those adult elements of something like Robert Crumb mixed with this like almost Archie, like, gee whiz, it's all just wholesome entertainment, folks, kind of a thing, but not in a wink wink, we're making fun of, like, new. And I think that's the thing that really, like, if I had to put my finger on what I think, people might read this and be like, no, this is not how you do it, like, this is breaking rules, is like, you can do something like adult Robert Crumb with an Archie-like naivete and have that be that self-aware, like, we're sending up the Archie-like naivete by sticking all this adult stuff in there, and it's funny and it's fun, and maybe there's a real story in there too, but it is all about having the fun, and that isn't what this is. But it's not, self-aware isn't the right word for it, right? Because it's not trying to send up anything. It's not doing it in a way where it's like, you know, yuck yuck. It's like, it's doing it totally serious in both ways. Completely adult themes and adult subject matter with completely gee whiz, you know, we're like this wide-eyed just sweetness might be the better term for the naivety, where it's just like this sweetness and this wholesomeness that doesn't give a fuck what else, that it's throwing in all this explicit sex and violence on top of it. It's like, in Ron's mind, these two things fit together. And you want to explore all the adult themes, but you want to do it in this very sweet way. And it takes some getting used to. It is unlike any version of these kinds of things you've ever encountered before. Yeah. One thing, so this is the new edition of issue number 1. Let me take it out of the plastic so we don't get the glare from the light and whatnot, but this is the new edition of issue number 1. We have this is an original image that Ron did back in 1984 when he did the first issue originally. We have new colors on it, a new logo that we made for it. One of the things I was never happy about the original series was this sort of 90s CGI font logo thing that they had going on. I think this was a beautiful image for selling the book originally, but it doesn't prepare you for what the art style that's actually on the inside. So we really wanted to make sure that people knew what they were getting this time around. And it's like, this is the art. This logo fits the art style on the inside. we're printing these. As you can see, this is a smaller edition compared to all the previous editions that have ever come out, because this is the original art size. These were the original dimensions, so we've gotten rid of all these, the white space at the top and bottom that would just be sort of, it's almost like these are like European editions and, you know, printed in standard American comic size, where then you have to stick the bars, you have to like letterbox the comic page. And for this one, we got rid of most of that space, and we're actually doing it in its proper size for the very first time ever. We have multiple different cover images. This is the main cover A. I printed on the back of this test run, this is cover B, which is Russell Nohelty. He's a writer, a USA best-selling writer and author. A lot of people who do Kickstarter or in the comics community will know him. He's done Katrina Hates the Dead, the Godsverse Chronicles, Ichabod Jones' Monster Hunter, so many comics, so many novels. I have like 2 shelves dedicated to Russell's shit because I've bought almost all of it. And so me and Russell, he lives down in Long Beach, and so we're also kind of friends in this territory. And so I reached out to him, and I knew he did this sort of like very garage style DIY art. And it's funny, he told me no twice before he said yes. Because he was like, I'm not a good enough artist to do a cover for a comic. I'm like, no, you're a perfect artist to do a cover for this. And he was like, and he kept getting like the sweats thinking about doing a image that would go on a cover for someone else's comic. And he's like, I can't, no, I'm sorry, man, I'm so sorry. I never want to tell you no, but I have to say no. So he said that twice, and I gave up after the second time, and I was like, sure. I'm like, no harm, no foul. I had a feeling it would be a stretch to ask. And a week later, he just dropped this in my inbox and was like, I got inspired, I tried it, I hope you like it, here you go. And so we've made it cover B, and the logo will go up here on that. And then we have a wraparound cover, cover C, by Angela Odling, who's done 2 comic series, Detached and Lucifer Licorice, and her style is perfect for Armageddon Quest as well. It really gets you, she's very modern. I would give her comics with an X if I gave her, you know, the old school 80s style of comics thing. Like, she is that version of that today. So I did want a cover that had a bit more of a modern style, but still was in the right ballpark of like, this is the aesthetic of this comic. I did not want like a glitzy Dynamite Entertainment style cover or something glossy or slick, because I'm like, that is not this comic. I don't want anyone to be like, that's a cool image, and then open the comic and be like, what is that? Other things we have going on in this campaign outside of the covers, and you can get any mix and match bundle of those covers, and of course it's available digitally as well. We have t-shirts. We have a Safe for Grandma and a Not Safe for Grandma version of the t-shirt with I Am on Team Antichrist. It has the picture of a grown-up Tazio, and then we have I'm on Team Tazio, and then underneath, so it's like I'm on Team Antichrist, and then he's easy on the eyes for Dark Messiah. So those t-shirts are part of the campaign, and then we also have the top tier. We don't really have a lot of bells and whistles on this one. We do have stretch goal bells and whistles, I'll get to that in a minute. But outside of the comics themselves, the 3 covers and the t-shirts, we just have a top tier, which is the very first 10 copies off the printer. But you can get one of each cover. It's a bundle of all 3. And the printer is going to print these 10 copies of each cover first before they print anything else. They're going to be their own little batches. And these are the first copies of Armageddon Quest printed in over a quarter of a century. So I'm very happy to be offering this. It's going to have an internal, will be this image with a hand numbered, and it will say this is one of the first 10 copies off the printer, and it will be hand numbered 1 through 10 with this image here, which will be missing from all the other copies. That will not be on the inside, so that will be your numbered edition. You have to buy it as a bundle of all 3, so there are only 10 bundles available, and that's it, the end. And we'll be doing that for every single issue as we go. So if you get it for the first one, you can get it for the second one, you get it for the third one. But that's the top tier. And then we've just unlocked our first stretch goals of digital comics, and we just unlocked a full digital graphic novel of Patrick Coyle's Bixby Grant. We had him on Wine and Comics Pairing Show just tail end of last year. Really fucking amazing comic, 80 pages. And the next stretch goal at $1,500, we have a full graphic novel of Steve Laffler's 1956. And Steve is another great unsung 1970s, 80s underground comics guy. And he is another one of my favorites. If you've never read, his big claim to fame in the 70s, 80s was Dog Boy. And then in the 80s into the 90s, he did this comic called Bug House. And if you've never read Bug House, it's now in an omnibus collection that you can get with the whole series in one. And that is another one that I think is just one of the greatest. I think it's one of the greatest comic series ever done. It's definitely, Bug House would be, I think, on my top 10. Definitely my top 20 of all time. This is Steve's latest. This actually just came out 2 years ago, and volume 2 came out last year, and now he's working on volume 3, and everyone gets a free digital copy of this 56-page graphic novel of volume 1. I felt like giving people a Steve Laffler, if you've never dipped into Steve Laffler, get in on this campaign. This is a great comic to get a little taste of that as well. And then we have more and more stretch goals to come that have not been revealed yet. No. I can't reveal quite yet. But there are 6 more stretch goals at least to come, depending on how we do that. Will all be leading up to actually funding. And then 1 or 2, I only have 1 picked out so far, that will be our first stretch goal after funding, like what we can do if we raise just a little bit more. I'm not expecting more than that this time, so I'm ill prepared if we go further than that, but good problem to have. And I'm hoping this should all be fulfilled because the comic is done. We've already done the test printing and everything. I mean, once the Kickstarter funds clear, I send that thing to the printer, send the files to them, and we get it going. So the digital awards should be fulfilled in March, and the physical should be fulfilled in April, and done. So it should be like a month and a half post-campaign. We're wiping our hands and on to issue 2. I'm hoping to get issue 2 and 3 in this year. We'll see how much this kills me to go through these campaigns, and like, do I always want to be doing a campaign? And that's something I've got to pace myself and make sure. But there is a lot of this comic, and I do want to get through. I definitely don't want to do like an issue a year, or even just 2 issues a year feels too slow to me. So I want to at least do 3 for the first year, hopefully get that up to 4 for the next year. And it's 6 issues for the first trade paperback. Plan is to do single issues for the first 6 chapters, then do a trade paperback collection. I'm gonna take stock of how we're doing after that, and if it's popular enough, we'll just do trade paperbacks for the 2nd and 3rd and get them out there quicker for folks if I think that readership has been built and we can raise the money to do a full trade paperback. I do want to try and do hardcover trade. I want to give this the full Monty treatment at like the highest quality that we can do. I feel like this comic finally deserves something like that. And by the way, just the single issues that we're doing too, nice thick cardstock style covers, matte finish. We are going to be, the paper inside will also be nice and thick and uncoated to give it that nice old school newspapery feel, because I love that feel. God, I love that feel. But then matte on the outside so it's nice and smooth. We might just keep doing single, I mean, if people love the single issues too. If people are like, no, we want all the covers, we want all the, like, these are collectible now, like, keep going, like, don't just do the trade paperbacks. That will be something that I'll probably ask of our backers and be like, what do you guys feel? Do you love the single issues? Do you want to get this quicker? You know, which way should we go on this? But that's, in the back of my head, that's the plan. I guess the only thing I'll say is, you know, this is hopefully the first, not just of many Armageddon Quest, but the first of many forgotten comic series. This is definitely a passion of mine, and I have more than one that I've been saying, a few more that are, I feel like Armageddon Quest is my all-time favorite. These others are very close runners-up, and they are, I feel like Armageddon Quest is the most unknown, had its least moment in the sun before just suddenly disappearing altogether. But all of these series are series that, like, their moment in the sun was nevertheless fleeting. And I feel like it's still, as time wears on, more and more of a struggle to find anyone that remembers them or you know, when you drop their name. And they're all series that are mind-blowing in their way, eye-opening in their way, and just, it's what the medium was honestly made for, in my eyes, where it's like, it can do things nothing else can pull off. And, you know, if you tried to do Armageddon Quest in the style that it is as a comic, with that dialogue and with the writing that's in the comic, like as a TV show, it would not work. Like, it only works as a comic. I have many more of those to come as well, so, you know, keep your eyes out for that. Once again, Wine and Comics Pairing Show, that's where you'll find us and what we do outside of the Kickstarters. Follow along there. We are always deep diving into lesser known series or brand new series, or a new crowdfunding series. Yeah, hopefully, I'm not even gonna say hopefully, because even if we fail on the first stab, like, I'm not, this is something I'm gonna figure out and I'm gonna unlock. So ArmageddonQuest is coming at you, bad boys. Whether you think you're gonna like that or not, like, we're finding a new audience for it.